and thank you for being here today. My name is Amy Bryant of Parenting Beyond Punishment. I provide local and online parenting consultations, and here in Atlanta, Georgia, I provide counseling sessions at Wild Child Counseling. And today I am excited to be here with Sheena Hill of Parenting Works. Sheena is a local parenting coach in Baltimore, Maryland, and she also does distance parent coaching at Parenting Works. And Sheena, what is your website? It's Parenting Works?
It's parentingworks.weebly.com.
Excellent. So you can find her at that website, and we'll include that in this link. Sheena, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. It's always a pleasure to participate in this annual event. I think is this the fourth year?
It is the fourth year.
Oh, that's exciting.
It is exciting. It is. And it's exciting to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I wanted to put together this sort of brief back to the basics webinar on the differences between punishment and discipline. Every time I'm thinking about what I'm going to do for you for the upcoming year, I'm always thinking about what are the sort of big picture things that parents might be really struggling with, but this year I thought maybe it would be good to just have something that was really breaking it down as much as possible, and that way we can make sure that everybody has all the information so they can get to the big picture stuff, because there's always work to be done in parenting. So sometimes we have a lot of spaces where we need information.
There's so much information, and I think getting clear about the differences between discipline and punishment is important, because a lot of times when we say parenting beyond punishment, the big feedback we get is, what do you mean you don't punish your kids? Your kids are just going to run all over. And I think that's what you're talking about today. It's not that we're saying don't discipline. It's saying, we don't have to punish our children in order for them to grow up to be healthy, capable humans, and to be capable, healthy humans now as children.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting, the two words punishment and discipline are often used interchangeably in our society, and that's where some of the confusion I think comes in when parents think, if I'm not punishing, what am I doing instead? And that's actually a great question for us to be asking, right? Because there's plenty of things that you can do instead. And so I think that this will help give parents some ideas of what they might be able to do, instead of punishment, and really have it, become a deep understanding that the two are not synonymous. To begin with, they have very different goals, right? When we think of punishment, we're really thinking of a goal that essentially means to hurt. We are having our own triggers or our emotional reaction to our child's behavior, whether it's the first time or the 100th time today. In a lot of cases, that behavior feels personal to us. It feels like an affront to us and our sense of self and our capacity to parent effectively. There are so many things that are linked to that third time that our child didn't listen to us when we said we need to put shoes on and get out the door. It can happen pretty quickly where we feel so strongly, and when we feel strongly, a lot of times our initial reaction is to lash out and to hurt somebody else and to make sure that they feel some little bit of what we're feeling, because our hurt is so big for us and so painful, and we almost don't know what else to do with it and how else to manage it, but to let it overflow. So that's essentially what punishment is, right? Our goal is to make our child hurt enough to learn a lesson, so that they really feel the pain, and somehow that's supposed to create a connection in their brain, not to repeat the behavior. And we're going to talk about, later on why that's not effective. But when we compare it, sorry, Amy?
I was thinking, we sometimes, we have this mistaken belief that children have to be hurt in order to learn the lesson, right? So in addition to our own hurt that spills over, that image just feels so big. Sheena, I like it. I mean, I don't like it. I experience it. It does spill over, but then also, like, how do we wrestle with that idea that do children really have to hurt to learn? So thank you.
You're welcome. So when we think about, comparing it to discipline, right, the ultimate goal of discipline is to teach. And that's, if we look at the root of the word disciple, which is a student, right? So our goal when we discipline, right, true discipline that is not punishment focused, is to teach our child what to do instead of, whatever they're having a hard time with. And in a lot of cases, they need us to support them in that. And obviously, as they get older, they might need different support, or they might need less support. But especially our young children, they actually need us, to know what to do instead. They just can't abstractly think, oh, my mom is really stressed from being late, and I should run and put my shoes on right away in order to make her day better. I would be great if our kids were thinking that, but they're just focused on themselves and their own needs. They're not, really aware of our needs. Sometimes even our own spouses aren't aware of our needs in those ways. So, it's amazing that we expect our children to be able to anticipate and understand our needs. So we have to teach them how to work with us and teach them that we're willing to work with them in order to solve problems. One of the ways that the goals are sort of achieved is just the whether or not the actions are connecting or disconnecting. So when we have punishment, automatically we're creating disconnections, we're creating distance, right? If we're putting our child in timeout, we're telling them, go over here and have your emotion alone, and don't expect anything from me, right, until you're calm. We are, possibly spanking our child or shaming our child or yelling at our child, which feels disconnecting on both ends, right? That's really, I think, the important point there. It's not just disconnecting for the child where they feel misunderstood, where they feel confused, or they feel scared and anxious of the parent, and they feel like, my parent is unreliable. I never know how they're going to behave. But it's also super disconnecting for us, right? When I think about the times that I've lost it with my kids, I feel so bad afterwards. I just feel I feel so awful. And so then it's harder for everybody to make a repair, right? It takes a lot for me, even as the parent, to sort of swallow my pride and go back to my child and say, gosh, I'm so sorry that I, snapped at you. And sometimes, sometimes parents are unable to do that, right? So it's really disconnecting when we focus on hurting to teach a lesson. But when we're teaching what to do instead, when we're really doing active discipline, it's very connecting because it's based on our relationship. It's based on cooperation and working together and communication. And one of the things that you said earlier, Amy, is really the essence of this idea of connection, that, we, wait, now I forgot what I was going to say. We really, want our kids to know that they're allowed to be kids and they're allowed to make mistakes, and we model that for them, right? We make mistakes, we make repairs after the mistakes. So it's always about, trying to find ways to connect. Again, the punishment relies on fear, right? That's very disconnecting. And it can have a cumulative effect. That's sometimes hard to recognize. But when we think about discipline, we're actually thinking about respect. And it's a mutual respect that's at the center of that connection, where I think my child, as you said earlier, see, I remembered, I think my child is a whole, capable person who is worthy of my respect by default. And they're not a perfect person, and they make mistakes, but they're still worthy of my respect. They don't even have to earn my respect because they don't have a lot of power in the world, and I'm willing to give my respect just for knowing them and seeing how awesome they are. And showing kids that respect and treating them in a respectful way, in an authentic, respectful way, really does engender respect from them. They're much more willing to learn to respect us and let us earn that respect from them. One of the big differences that I always draw people's attention to when we think about the difference between punishment and discipline are, really the focal points, right? So the focal points of punishment are obedience and compliance, right? We need our kid to listen the first time, right away. We need our kid to listen, from across the room. We need our kid to listen when we're losing it. We need our kid to be in control. And that's a lot to expect of a child. Whereas discipline, really, where the foundation is teaching our child responsibility. We're not looking for immediate compliance. We're not looking for obedience. We expect that our job is to lovingly set limits and enforce them. And our child's job is to test those limits and, seek ways to figure out their own identity and their own independence and their own needs and express themselves within and around those limits.
What came up for me is we want them to take responsibility for the choices they make. And if they're choosing to obey us or choosing to be compliant, are they also choosing to think about whether they don't want to be obedient or don't want to be compliant, and why? It's like, do we set them up to obey authority without responsibility? You're obeying without taking any responsibility at all. I was told to do this, so I did it.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. We don't want our kids to just, not get caught, right? Which is essentially what punishment teaches. It doesn't teach our kids to change their behavior. It teaches them to be sneaky. And we understand this as adults, right? If, here around Baltimore where I live, there are lots of speed cameras, red light cameras, and you know where they are, you see the cameras. And I drive around all day, taking my kids places and going to car seat appointments and seeing clients. And I see how people drive, because I'm always concerned about driver safety. And people don't slow down, right? They'd speed until they're close to that camera, and then they, stop short, which is actually even more dangerous because it could cause more accidents. So even adults don't change their behavior when there's a potential consequence. I think here the fine's like $75 or something. I mean, it's crazy. And so people just become sneakier, right? They're just figuring out how to not get caught. And we don't want our kids to not understand the difference between right and wrong in an internal, personalized way, because we want them to do the right thing, even when nobody's looking, even when there's no worry of, getting caught, because that's what makes a good citizen, right? There's all sorts of research that's been coming out recently about how, intrinsic motivation is so valuable, and young people, are not getting a lot of that these days when everything is instant gratification, and that it's making people more selfish, right? And less of a good community member, right? If a little old lady needs help in the grocery store, they might think to themselves, well, what's in it for me, and choose not to help her, instead of thinking, this little old lady is a part of my community, I would want somebody to help my grandmother get the soup off the top shelf. You know, it's going to take a couple minutes. Let's help the little old lady. So, so we definitely want to teach that sense of responsibility, and that's crucial. Absolutely. And obviously the best way to do that is through a relationship-based form of discipline, right? Where we are not abusing our power. I was just talking about this with some parents last night, that, you know, we have inherent power, right? There's no doubt about that. We are the adult. We make most of the big decisions. We decide where they live, where they go to school. We buy their clothes. In many cases, we might even choose their friends, right? So, you know, our kids have very little power in the world. And even if we give them some power in our homes, like, you know, do you want cooked carrots or broccoli for dinner, or do you want the red shirt or the green shirt? It's still small relative to all the power that we have. And it's not a bad thing that we have that inherent power, right? We do have wisdom, and we do have life experience that's helping to guide our children, but we need to use that power responsibly. We can't just, you know, abuse that power and say, well, I have absolute power, right? Because that doesn't help our child feel empowered, and it doesn't help to really grow that sense of trust and respect in the relationship. So, so that's, you know, that's one thing that we want to think about, you know, as our own responsibility as well. And, you know, another big distinction is the punishment tends to focus on what the parent wants, right? I want my child to get out the door quickly, so they need to listen right away. I want my child to go to bed without being awake for an hour because, you know, I just lose it, right? I can't stand anymore. So I'm willing to just, you know, let them cry in there because I just can't take, you know, one more second. You know, I want my child to not do something dangerous, so I want to hurt them, so I might spank them if they run into the street, or do something that I, you know, really think I need to teach a lesson in order to burn into their memory. Whereas discipline sort of, in a lot of ways, it takes us out of it, right? You know, our biggest work as parents, in my opinion, I don't know, Amy, if you would agree with this, is being able to detect our own feelings and triggers, and not to repress them, but to sort of, you know, collect them, set them aside to work on with adult peers, right? Whether that's our spouse, our family and friends, a listening partnership, you know, a parenting coach, or a therapist or a counselor. You know, we shouldn't be working out our stuff with our kids in their moment of crisis, right? Because that's taking away from what's really, you know, the priority in that situation. So I think we're supposed to sort of take our stuff, deal with it, be aware of it, but deal with it with other adults, you know, in an adult context, where we can tell our listening partner, you know, gosh, I just wanted to scream at them and shake them, you know, but we wouldn't say that to our kids. So in the moment, with our stuff sort of parked, you know, safely to deal with later, we can really focus on what our child needs. We can focus on their underlying emotions and their triggers, and we can try to figure out, you know, is there something that's really a backlog of unmet needs here, or is this just an immediate need? How can I use my connection and use my relationship to figure out what my child needs and meet that need? Because, you know, certainly under every behavior, there's a need, right? That's really the core of the distinction in the mentality between the two, that our children are not trying to drive us crazy or push our buttons, even though they may do that. They're really being kids, and they're trying to figure out their place in the world and grow into adults, because they're not many adults, right? Their brains are different, their bodies are different. And so, you know, they're really, you know, just needing us. And so discipline is focusing on figuring out what that behavior is communicating, what is the need underneath, and how we can help them get that need met, or how we can help them help themselves get that need met, right? That, you know, one thing that we are teaching is responsibility. So when they're young, they may need us a lot to meet those needs. And then as they grow, they may be able to meet some of those needs on their own, but we're providing the structure, the safe emotional space where they can do some of that work and seek some of that.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's, you know, this, I think you were saying basically that um, our children aren't trying to give us a hard time. And someone says this in a book or something, that they're not trying to give us a hard time, they're having a hard time. And that's what their behavior is showing us. Like, I'm having a really hard time, Mom. I'm having a really hard time, Dad. And I'm showing you by biting or kicking or screaming or throwing my food or kicking the cat or, you know, whatever that behavior is. And while as a parent, I might want my child to just go to sleep instead of talking a mile a minute when the lights go out, or asking for that second glass of water or third or fourth, um, I have to sort of set that aside. And I do have to deal with it. But in that moment, to get so curious, like, what is it that my child is needing? And of course, at night, what they need is that connection with us.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, thanks, Sheena.
You're welcome. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide.
Okay.
I tried to go to it on the computer because it's your computer, so it's very confusing to me. Okay, so I'm glad we worked it out.
You just
So
let me know.
okay, thank you,
Okay.
thank you. As long as it didn't hurt anything, that's the most important thing, Amy. Um, so again, when we're looking at the distinction between punishment and discipline, right, what it really comes down to, it's not just a judgment call, right? We're not just sitting in our parent counseling offices pointing fingers at parents and saying you shouldn't do that because it's wrong. We know that punishment is ineffective. We know that when children are feeling hurt or anxious or afraid, and especially when they're desperately signaling to us that they have a need, and we are either ignoring that signal or not trying to meet the need. Sometimes we can't always meet the need, right? That's the truth. But at least we can try. And that's really all that matters, is, are we trying to meet those needs? And so if we're not trying, if we're just sort of dismissive of the need and saying to our child, you don't have that need, or I don't think you should have that need, or I don't have that need, so why do you have that need? um, they feel more isolated from us. They feel more anxious about the world. They feel more powerless and confused in the world. And it really can create a lot of maladaptive relationship skills, right, which are going to follow them in all their relationships throughout their life, because they're learning through the adult parent-child interaction. How do I trust people? What does love feel like? How do I give unconditionally to other people's needs? How do other people take care of my needs? And so whether we are really making that connection with them, it influences them a lot. And so we know that when we punish, we are not only teaching them the skills that they need to listen to us and cooperate with us in the short term, which is what we want, but we also have to think about the big term goals. They're not learning the life skills that they're going to need later on. And every time that we punish, we are actually creating more of a gap between our child and ourselves. And that doesn't mean that it's irreparable if you have punished, and it doesn't mean that you are doing irreparable damage if you sometimes lose it and punish, right? We're not talking about perfection, but we are talking about growing our own skills, so that we have more self-control. We have the ability to self-regulate in the moment and say, you know what, I'm getting upset, I'm going to walk away and get a drink of water and text my friend or splash some water on my face or take some deep breaths. You know, we're just building our own skills. And we know that discipline is much more is a much more effective way to teach our children to be, essentially good family members while they're young, because that's really what we're teaching them, right? We're teaching them our family rules, our house rules. This is how we interact with each other. This is how we respect the space that we live in. And those rules carry into the world, right? You know, this is how we treat our friends when we're out. This is how we treat our teachers when we're at school. And it's much easier for them to learn those skills and learn those lessons when they're connected with us, right? When they feel safe with us. And safe, you know, we could talk about this for a long time, but really it means, you know, we're our child's safe place where they do some of that deep emotional work and they do, you know, work out some of the stuff that they're dealing with, because our kids have stressors, even though they're different from ours, they're very real. And so we want to, you know, provide that refuge, you know, for our kids to be able to grow and learn. And when they feel that, you know, ultimate trust and that safety, and when they feel connected to us and they feel respected and they feel listened to, then their brain is more capable, right, of staying in that rational place where they are able to learn, right? They're able to stay, you know, in a place where they're capable of learning instead of being stuck in their limbic system and, you know, just based on emotion and just based on being triggered and just being reactive all the time. So we know that learning doesn't happen when we're in that space.
Right. It's like when you talk about that relationship, when we punish our children or we spank them or we send them away from them, they don't feel safe, right? If they don't feel safe in our relationship with them, they can't come to us when something's going on. They can't come to us with questions because we're not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we really want. We're telling them, you know, you're bad and only I can figure out solutions. But then if they don't want to come to us for solutions, what skills do they have? You
It's
know?
such a great point. I mean, we think about our kids coming to us, or the need for our kids to come to us when they're teenagers, right? When they say, oh, somebody's pressuring me to smoke or skip class or do drugs or have sex or whatever else, you know, we might be afraid of. But I always tell parents, you know, if you want your kids to come to you when they're teens, you have to start listening to them now when they're young kids, and make sure they understand that they can come to you, because when they come to you with their problems from, you know, preschool that seem small by comparison, you know, how we respond really does determine how they're going to file that away. You know, is my parent a safe person? And I certainly would much rather my teen call me and say, you know, Mom, I'm at a party, I've been drinking, please come and get me, right? Than to go in the car with somebody who's been drinking, or to drive herself, or to try to walk home by herself. I mean, you know, the ability to go to your parents and know that they're going to, you know, be there for you and understand your situation and not just punish you, you know, that's a big safety, you know, thing, especially as they get older.
And also that they'll believe you. You know, you think about if your preschooler comes to you and says, you know, and tells you a story, and that they're being isolated or they're being left out, do you say, well, what did you do? You know, are we blaming them or shaming them? Or are we saying, oh, you know, gosh, that must be difficult. Tell me more. You know, are we listening to them and getting curious? Or are we shutting them down and blaming them? And those are the stories that carry over when they're teenagers. Are they going to come to us because we're going to listen, or are they going to say, no way am I getting blamed for this, right? No, mom's just going to blame me or shame me and make me feel bad, and I already feel bad enough. You know?
Exactly. No, that's a really good example with the listening and believing. Thank you, Amy.
Are we ready for the next slide?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot of this stuff that, the focus is sort of on these internal beliefs, right? That, for when you're thinking about punishment, you're more likely to think my kid is bad and manipulative. They need to be taught a lesson. Or especially, we hear so much, right? I was punished this way and I turned out fine. Whereas when we're focused on discipline, we're thinking, this behavior is communicating a need, and my kids are good. They want to be close to me. I actually, one of the things I was recently talking with some clients about was being able to stop and take that breath and remember, my mind is playing a trick on me, right? My brain is telling me my child is manipulative. My child is trying to push my buttons. My child is trying to drive me crazy. My child is being disrespectful. And I'm, I tell parents, stop your brain, say, wait a second, I don't believe you, right? My child is not being disrespectful. My child is communicating the best way that they know how. And they're complaining about a limit that I set, or, they're having a big reaction to something that's going on. So a change in perspective actually makes such a huge difference in our ability to stay calm, to not take things personally, and to really stay focused on our child and what they need in that moment from us. We often think about, punishment as kids are just being punished for being kids, right? They're just doing normal exploration. They're doing developmentally appropriate behaviors like running around, and it's annoying to us. It's irritating to us. It's more work to us. And it really is, for sure, right? My son's 20 months old. It is so much work. but we have to remember they're just being kids. This is how they're learning. This is their brain working so hard. So again, that shift in perspective, really is the foundation. The foundation is understanding what is developmentally appropriate, what's normal for our child to do, what's normal to expect. And it really teaches our kids what to do instead of causing these behavior bursts, where they're only good when we're around, but at a friend's house, they're getting into, the same stuff. And as we've said, it definitely helps with the long-term goals. So good. I'm glad we got to all this stuff very organically, Amy. Look at that.
I was thinking, kids do complain about limits, right? And that can be irritating because we'd be like, this is what's best for you. But I think, gosh, how many limits do we complain about? Like, I complain about the speed limit sometimes, right? But just remembering, of course they're complaining about that limit. It's not what they want. And it's okay for them to have those feelings about it. They don't have to like the limit. I don't like the limit a lot of time. And we just feel that way. We feel that way about cake. Okay, let's just have one piece of cake,
Oh, yes.
What's that limit? Can't I have half, right?
Yeah, it's, one thing I always remind parents, which I think is very liberating in a lot of ways, you don't have to change your limit or change your mind just because your child has a strong reaction to the limit, and just because you hold space and validate that limit and help them, help them manage through it, right? You co-regulate with them and you understand and you ask questions. You still don't have to change your limit, even though you're being a parent in that moment, because really what you're doing is saying, this is the limit, but I'm compassionate to the fact that it's not what you want, and I'm still going to hold the limit because I'm the parent, and you have to get in your car seat, right? That's a non-negotiable. Or you have to take a bath because you haven't taken a bath in 3 days, and right, whatever the limit is, we can hold it and still hold their emotion, and that's really, I think one of the things that you and I help parents with, right, Amy? We help parents learn to do that because it's so hard.
It is. And we don't have to fix it for them, right?
Exactly.
We don't have to make them feel better about the limits. We can just be understanding and compassionate about it. I will say, though, there are some times when we might set a limit that maybe we haven't really thought much about, and we see our child's reaction and it makes us go, oh, wait, actually, you're right. We could take a bath after the popsicle, right? Instead
Yeah,
of having the bath first. There are those times when we might say, oh, actually, I could rethink this limit. But there are times, like you said, Sheena, when actually we are going to have to hold this limit. And that's okay too. We don't have to fix it. They don't have to like it. Um, and we can be kind about it. And if you feel
exactly.
frustrated by their upset, that's okay too. You can feel frustrated and just be kind to yourself for feeling frustrated. It's not your fault you feel frustrated either,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
It's just an emotion. It's uncomfortable. But we can learn to sit with that discomfort, and we can help our kids learn to sit with that discomfort.
It is amazing. Do we want to look at the next slide? It is amazing how we really are so uncomfortable with emotions, right? You know, and we're uncomfortable with everybody's, and our kids are especially triggering for us, probably from a lot of our own childhood experiences. Um, so these are, you know, this is just a quick review of some of the things we've already talked about, right? The punishment tends to be more focused on the parents' needs and feelings, whereas discipline is really about prioritizing the child's needs and feelings in that moment. Um, and if there's multiple kids involved, right, prioritizing everybody's needs and feelings. You know, we don't need to say, well, you did the hitting, so you're in trouble. And you know, really take sides when we're intervening or trying to help our kids, you know, process through a squabble. That everybody's needs and feelings matter in that moment, even the child who may have snatched a toy or hit her brother or you know, screamed, right? Because there's still needs and feelings going on there. They're just showing it in a more aggressive or dramatic way, which actually means they have more need, right? They really need help. Um, Punishment is, you know, really about top-down instruction, right? The parent knows best. And discipline is more of a collaborative process where we're still the leader, but we're guiding our child. And Amy, just as you said, right, the huge distinction between my child is giving me a problem and, you know, or my child is giving me a hard time, my child is having a hard time. One of the things I always like to point out is really the difference between being short-sighted about parenting and really being focused on the big picture. You know, parenting is a marathon. It really is. We are parents for our whole lives, even when our kids are adults. And so, you know, sometimes when I'm getting really frustrated, I think, what do I want my relationship to look like when my child is 30 or 40? And it actually is such a great tool in that moment to sort of calm down and say, you know, does this matter that, you know, the dishes weren't done to my immediate specification? You know, am I going to lose it and go and scream, or am I going to wait till the morning till I'm calm and sort of say, hey, do you see this? This is dirty. You know, do you want to drink off that? And treat, you know, treat my child like I would treat my friend, right? My future child, because they're deserving of that respect.
I have a story that you've told me. I'm going to share your story, and
Okay.
you can fix it. I just remember you saying, because you know, parenting young children is so different and takes a different energy, both very intense energies than parenting teenagers. And your older daughter is 12,
She just turned 13. She
13.
just had a
Yes,
birthday.
yes. Happy birthday.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
but you gave this analogy that you know, we parent with discipline versus punishment, and it's kind of like, I hope I get this right, but you know, we're practicing this type of parenting, and it's not that our kids aren't going to be kids, and they're still going to make mistakes, and they're still going to have tantrums, and they're still going to do stuff that they know is against the rules, um,
Hmm.
and they're still going to cry and yell and scream and do those things. But the long-term goal as they're young and we're teaching them over and over and over and moment by moment, is really sort of building up our tolerance for what happens when they're teens. So we've got really strong, muscles around coping with difficult situations. Do you remember telling me this?
I do not. That is so funny.
It's so, I go, oh, Sheena, this is one of those moments. I'll say that. I'm building my muscle. I'm building my
Yes.
peaceful parenting muscle so that when the sand hits the fan, so to speak, when they're older, that I can handle it, that I can respond in a way that it is modeling what to do when things are difficult, when someone does something you don't like, when your spouse or your partner or your colleague or your friend does something, and instead of hitting the roof, you go, "Whew, help me understand," right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's the big picture, because that's what we want in our families. That's how we want to treat each other. And that's how we want them to go into relationships with other people.
Absolutely. Well, I know we only have a couple more minutes, so I want to get to sort of the meat and potatoes, which is just some examples of what you can do instead of punishment, right? We all know punishment pretty easily, right? Spanking, yelling, shaming, timeout, loss of privileges, throwing things away, right? I hate that one, throwing things away. That's also punishment for me, the parent. Now I have to buy all new toys. Um, but so many times people are asking us, right, Amy, well, what do I do instead? And probably the top answer that I give, which is also hard work. I really work with parents for months on cultivating this skill, is inviting play and laughter into your situation where you may have previously punished. And it might feel different, it might feel awkward for a while, but what our kids are really needing is our connection. So initiating that play and laughter with them, being silly and saying, oh, you don't want to wear your shoes, okay, that's no problem, let's put them on your hands. Oh, okay, we're gonna tie them up, let me tie them up for you. And they're laughing and they're falling on the floor, and really then they're sort of reset, right? They are able to recover from being upset that we had to get out the door. And then you're able to say, oh, wait, that means you would have to walk on your hands. That's not going to work. How about we put them on your feet? And then they're agreeable, right? They're like, of course, yes, let's put them on our feet.
And we feel connected and good about it. Laughter is so connecting, and we go from we're in a hurry and we're late, and oh my gosh, he's not listening, to that was really fun. That felt good.
And the thing to remember truly is that in the moment, especially if you're new to it, it might feel like a long time, but if you look at your clock, it's actually a pretty brief period of time, and it doesn't take a long time, right? We're definitely talking about quality over quantity. Other big discipline tools are understanding and, being compassionate, which we've talked about, knowing child development, building your own emotional intelligence skills and helping your child build theirs, building your empathy capacity, and being able to model that for your kids. Certainly setting limits, right? Setting limits is so important. This is not permissive parenting. This is parenting with limits that are just set and reinforced respectfully and lovingly. And that's a big misconception. People think you can only set limits if you're angry, if you're yelling, if you're spanking, if you're threatening, and that's just not true. We can set limits and we can hold limits in a truly responsive, emotionally connective way. Listening and having good communication skills with our kids, modeling behaviors we want for them, time in, right? This is just the opposite of time out. Instead of sending our kids to deal with their emotions on their own, we're saying, I see you're having a hard time. Come over here, let's sit in this comfy chair and let's read a story and take some deep breaths and calm down together so that we can go back to our play or we can solve whatever problem was going on. So it helps everybody to learn to sort of ride out those emotions and learn that, oh, my emotion is okay. It's manageable, right? It's temporary. I can feel upset and I can get through it, because it's so scary, to think this is how I'm going to feel forever. Redirection, but we're not redirecting away from emotion, right? As you said earlier, Amy, we don't want to fix our kids' emotion. As someone who shall not be named, a special grandparent in our life, likes to say, "Oh, you're crying, here's some cookies," right? "Oh, you're crying, let me turn on the TV. Oh, you're crying, let's have a new toy, like this makes noise and jingles." And,
Have
you're
a
just,
second piece of cake.
exactly. You're just thinking, no, we're not dampening the crying. It's okay to have the crying. We're not redirecting and distracting from emotion, but we can redirect and help a child play with something or have their focus on something that is child appropriate instead of something that's not, right? No, you cannot play with my cell phone because you change the settings and then I can't put them back. True story. But you can play with this old cell phone that, you can push all the buttons you want and it still rings, but I don't have to worry about you deleting my contacts, right? So there is, there's the distinction in the redirection.
Yeah. Well, and even, kids love to throw stuff. So no, you can't throw the blocks at the dog, but you can throw them into this basket. Like that's that child development piece. What is it that they're needing? They want to explore the phone. Here's a phone you can use. They want to throw something. Here's where you can throw it safely. Um,
Absolutely.
and Sheena and I can both help you figure these things out.
Yes, yes.
How
Yeah.
do you do it? Because it's not easy, right? It takes a lot of time.
And people tell me a lot, Amy, and I'm sure that people tell you as well. And we talk about this a lot, right? A lot of times, friends or clients will say to me, "It seems so easy for you." And what I tell them every time, I'm very transparent about it. That's because this is what I'm reading about and thinking about and focusing on all the time. This is actually my job. So if your job is something else and you're spending 40, 60 hours a week thinking about something else, of course you're not thinking about parenting because you don't have the brain capacity to be thinking about and obsessing about all of those things, during that time. And so that's why, we've worked hard on our skills and we enjoy helping parents because we know that it's possible. You don't have to be perfect. You can work on your skills and grow as a parent. And just finishing up here, right, doing problem solving with our kids and logical and natural consequences. I know this is a big topic. We could probably talk a lot about that, and we don't have time today, but I know you probably have some good articles in the event this year, right? I think I saw a couple once posted on the page, some good articles about, really what should be a natural consequence and a logical consequence, and still staying within the vein of discipline and not veering over to the punishment side when you're thinking about, natural and logical consequences.
Right. Which can be hard to navigate, I think. So,
100%. Yeah, no, it's I think it's very confusing for parents, especially the logical consequences that can be very confusing.
it so easily crosses over.
And we can also talk about, I think when we post the video, we're going to do a Q&A, and so we can talk about that some more on the Facebook page when we do the Q&A.
Also, just so you know, this is a worksheet for y'all. You can download it and use it to figure out new solutions for things that you're currently punishing or using punishments for, just to help guide you. It's just sort of a simple guide. And of course, you can always contact Sheena at Parenting Works and me at Parenting Beyond Punishment or Wild Child Counseling. Thank you so much, Sheena, for being here today.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate it. And I also just wanted to remind everybody that I am the new parenting expert on the Tiny Hood app. So they can also get, parenting questions, not as in depth, obviously, as the coaching and counseling and really working together in an intensive way, but sort of more on the fly questions answered through the app. So that's also a good way to reach me. But thank you so much.
And that's Tiny Hood, like neighborhood, but Tiny Hood.
Exactly,
Okay.
Tiny
And it's an
Hood.
app.
It's an app. Yes.
Excellent. All right.
It's a really cool app, actually. I'm really excited to be a part of it. But thank you so much for allowing me to present this and to work with parents on some of these, foundational concepts. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for being here. We'll see you at the event.